right, guys. Let's see. Can we all hear? Looks like video's live. Audio hopefully is live. You let me know if it's not, gang, and we'll go from there. All right. So Lens is, just to do a little follow-up here, I've been lucky enough to speak at Lens twice in the last 2 years. They do a great job organizing this event. If you haven't been to a Lens event before, I recognize this one is going to be streamed. It's not going to be live, so you don't get the same camaraderie that you would in a live room, but the quality of information and the way in which it's presented, the quality of the speakers, and the actual take-home, Monday morning take-home, which I'm a big fan of, clinical applications is awesome. So sign up for Lens, go. You will not be sad about investing your time or money there. I think it's just a great opportunity to learn this whole big, beautiful combination of neurotransmitters along with endocrinology and some immunology and lifestyle medicine all rolled into one. They do a great job. So feel free to be sure to jump on in there. Let's make these slides move forward. We're going to do neurotransmitter connections to stress today. And I think stress was a good topic. We were kicking around different topics and what to do. And part of the reason there was, you know, there's so many different ways to present neurotransmitters symptom-wise. And with everything that's going on with COVID and the economy and practices in general, stress is a good topic. Now, when I originally would say stress in the office with my patients, they would say, Scott, it sounds so generic. And it does sort of kind of sound generic until you realize that the biology of stress and the neurochemistry of stress is anything but generic and super important to be able to test it and support it both with lifestyle as well as nutrition supplements and sometimes medications too, right? So I think the neurotransmitter connection to stress with a bunch of case studies, we'll do 3 case studies at the end, is super important. And that'll be good for all of us. Objectives, let's review and define neurotransmitters and cortisol just as a basic starting point so that if you're brand new to these concepts, you know what they actually are. Let's incorporate neurotransmitters and adrenal hormones, specifically cortisol, and we'll also notice DHEA involved in these neuroadrenal panels, into what we discuss for our practice and for our stress patients. And let's discuss strategies for treating the symptoms of neurotransmitters and cortisol challenges without prescription medications. And like I said, I will share 3 of my individual case reviews with you so that you get an idea of how that all works. I think it's always nice to learn through case studies, right? This picture is so fun. And I think, you know, as I'm sitting here and have 5 sticky notes in front of me on my desk with things that need to be still finished up before the end of the day, we all can relate to the concept of stress. But so often we stop at thinking, well, it's just lifestyle. I just have to change it, right? I just have to stop responding to what it is that's causing my stressor. Well, if we dive into the definition of stress from Merriam-Webster, we get to see that it's a physical, chemical, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension, and may even be a factor in disease causation. So bodily or mental tension resulting from factors that tend to alter your existent equilibrium or homeostasis. And that's really what it's all about, right? If you think about true long-term health and health care, it's about maintaining your homeostasis and equilibrium long-term, and stress can throw that off. Now, in my office, right, I've been practicing since 2000. So I've been around the block a couple of times, 21 years now. And when we discuss stress in the office with individuals, we tend to say, listen, you need to understand that stress responses, fight or flight types of responses, happen with physical, cognitive, or emotional stressors. So today, I'm going to show you some case studies where we have physical, somebody's been in an accident, where we have cognitive, somebody's having difficulty, learning something new with attention, and they're a student, they're a high school student, and emotional, where stress responses from family life are high. How do we understand that those stressors cause a fight or flight system to be able to, alter physiology, which is good short term, but long term may actually kind of hurt us, or we'll start running on fumes and not feeling so good, and it can lead to additional other physical, cognitive, and emotional subsequent symptoms clinically that don't turn out well if you don't support them and refill those fuel tanks. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers, and they regulate physical and emotional processes, including movement, stress responses, cognition, emotions, energy, cravings, pain, and more. We should put sleep in here too. Hormones and neurotransmitters help with sleep, and neurotransmitters never work alone. when we discuss all this stuff, we have to define it as neuroendocrinology. And really the bigger picture is even neuroendoimmunology. So it's neurotransmitters in the nervous system, endocrine system with hormones, stress hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones. And then you get into the immune system and inflammatory issues, right? Which could be from a horrible diet where all you eat is ice cream and hot dogs, or it could be something where all of a sudden you're being exposed to a chemical load and you just can't detoxify it fast enough. So these are all options where we can help somebody. And the neat thing about neuroendoimmunology is no matter which way you come into that system, you usually positively affect the other two. And the other neat thing about it is if you started, for example, with cortisol, right? And you didn't get the response you want, well, you can go into neuro and neurotransmitters, or you can go into immune and food and diet, and gut and lifestyle and detoxification, and usually help all three systems a little bit more. So it's rare that you're going to get stuck if you understand how neuro, endo, and immune all interact and dance together. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. For those of you that love organic chemistry, C21H30O5, produced by the adrenal cortex upon stimulation by adrenal corticotropic hormone. It mediates various metabolic processes such as gluconeogenesis, increases blood sugar, right? Has anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive properties, and whose level in the blood may become elevated in response to physical or psychological stressors. So again, we're back to that physical, cognitive, emotional stress response. It has a biochemical effect. And cortisol is the endocrine side of the stress response. Neurotransmitters is the neuro side of the stress response. So again, we're back to that neuroendocrine piece and how they play together. And that's such a nice thing to be able to look at and assess when we talk about neuroadrenal testing. Understand that you can't just do one neurotransmitter and expect to knock it out of the park. The chemistry of neurotransmitters and the chemistry of hormones is such that we want a snapshot that's a little bit wider than, say, just serotonin or just dopamine, or even more than just cortisol, right? So there's not just one neurotransmitter that's related to stress. Take that idea and throw it right in the garbage can, because it doesn't work that way. There are certainly a handful of neurotransmitters that are involved in stress, maybe more than a couple others, things like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine. Those would be kind of the top four. But then you can look at things like glutamate and histamine that are inflammatory and come from both the immune system and the nervous system. And if those guys are elevated, well, your stress response is going to be a little bit harder as well, because glutamate's so excitatory and it's going to throw off your ability to relax and think clearly and be attentive and things of that sort. So we need to understand here with this little diagram, norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine, there's overlap between symptomatologies here. They all help with anxiousness and depression and attention and cognition. They're all involved in sleep cycles in various ways. They're all involved in physical energy. So there are differences in objective markers and test results. You can take, 5 different stressed out patients and get 5 different neurotransmitter and adrenal hormone test results. And that's the beauty of the test. That would, originally people would say, well, it doesn't even matter. Why bother doing it? The test results are all over the place with a stressed patient. No. You got to flip that the other way. The beauty of the test is that it gives you, the clinician, and the patient the roadmap so that they know where to go on their chemistry, so that their stress response doesn't negatively affect them like it has been. And that's just one of the neatest things about neurotransmitter and hormone testing. And I've been doing neurotransmitter and hormone testing since 2004. So again, when you look at how well this works in a clinical setting, you get excited about it. And this is that overview of neuroendoimmune, right? You've got risk factors on the left-hand side of your screen. Yes, genetics play a part of this. Yes, diet and lifestyle plays a part of this. Yes, chronic infections such as, I'm in Wisconsin, Lyme disease plays a part of this. So you can't forget about any of that. But while we're going to support people with their central and peripheral nervous systems and their endocrine system, we need to recognize that if we do the right things with neurotransmitters and hormones and fill up those fuel tanks, we can help with physical energy. We can help with cognitive attention. We can help with mood. We can help with pain and pain processing. And it's everywhere. One of the biggest arguments against neurotransmitter testing is, Scott, it's a peripheral marker. Why would you do a peripheral marker to try to help somebody's nervous system? Well, it seems that we are often short-sighted and think of the nervous system as only central and only brain. which couldn't be further from the truth. Last I checked, your peripheral nervous system is pretty busy running the rest of the show outside of your brain and outside of your skull, right? So we want to make sure that we always remember central and peripheral together. We need to remember that neurotransmitters are ubiquitous and everywhere. We need to remember that every marker we look at, for the most part in medicine, unless you're doing a cerebrospinal tap, right? Every marker we look at is a peripheral marker. It all comes from either saliva, blood, urine, or stool. That's where our markers come from. And we recognize that if we optimize those markers, we not only improve peripheral physical symptoms, we improve brain function. And that's true of sex hormones, that's true of thyroid hormones, that's true of inflammatory food allergies, right? The peripheral markers, when we change them, our brain improves. So you can never separate central from peripheral. Stop that argument. It's silly. Peripheral markers have a place. Peripheral neurotransmitters have a great place clinically. Let's learn them and apply them. You know, they've been around for over 20 years. They're not new anymore. These are important to understand. So again, just a quick overview, everything, neuroendoimmune, gut, heart, digestion, right? Musculoskeletal system and chronic pain. A lot of that is important with serotonin and norepinephrine as well as cortisol. Quick little symptom list, right? When you look at the various different advertisements or promotional literature that are out there for neurotransmitters, whether it's from a pharmaceutical company with a prescription or whether it's a supplement company or whether it's a lab testing company, they tend to go after these symptomatologies. Cognitive impairment, ADD or attention deficits, chronic pain, headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, neurogenic irritable bowel syndrome is a thing. You have a lot of patients who they've changed their diet and they've changed their gut and they've cleaned a lot of things up, right? They've done the good hard work of lifestyle medicine with their gut. But because their poor little central nervous system and adrenal system is still under stress, that GI tract doesn't function well because of that fight or flight response. So I would call that a neurogenic irritable bowel. Mood challenges, anxiety, depression, fatigue naturally. And that could be both cognitive fatigue as well as physical fatigue. I try to separate those a little bit in the office. Sleep challenges, sleep is huge. Addictions, absolutely, especially right with dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin. Weight loss challenges and cravings and poor impulse control. All of these are involved in neurotransmitters and also to some extent with adrenal stress responses. So keep in mind these neuroadrenal system tests are broad in terms of the symptomatology that people present with, that they can also be beneficial with. And when we discuss our cases, you're going to see some of these basic amino acid precursors. So just real quick, amino acids are the precursors to various neurotransmitters. These are some of the more common ones that you're going to understand as you learn about neurotransmitters, tryptophan, tyrosine. GABA is both a neurotransmitter as well as an amino acid that you can take in supplement form. Same with taurine. Phenylalanine becomes PEA, 5-HTP becomes serotonin. Glutamine can become glutamate, but also nourishes your GI tract. Theanine and histidine becomes histamine, which can also give you some energy. These amino acids, being building blocks of proteins, right, for neurotransmitters, compete for absorption. So a lot of times, if you're going to take an amino acid supplement, we're going to do it in such a way that we are going to take it before food on an empty belly. I always tell patients 15 to 30 minutes. 30 minutes is ideal, 30 or more, away from protein-rich foods. It's going to compete for absorption with protein-rich foods. And amino acids are neat because they cross the blood-brain barrier. And there they can interact with some of the central nervous system, HPA axis, and neurotransmitter regulation that helps with stress responses. So very, very cool. If you haven't seen this before, or if you're new to Doctor's Data or Labrix, these are the pathways, the just biochemistry pathways that are involved in neurotransmitter production. So you have amino acids. If you look on the top right here, you have tryptophan. I think you guys can see my mouse. Tryptophan becomes 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan, and converts down to serotonin, and eventually converts to melatonin. So if you haven't seen these before, get these from the lab. They're easy to find on the website. I'm sure some of our administrators here that are helping with this today would be happy to show you where they can link them or email them to you. And these pathway charts are helpful for both patients as well as practitioners as you're learning which supplement protocols become which neurotransmitters and why we would want to choose various supplements to support the neuroendocrine system. Now, this is a silly little slide that I created the better part of 20 years ago that I still use to teach, because when we talk about stress responses, We talk about neurotransmitters and we talk about cortisol, but really what we're talking about is the balance between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. And that sympathetic nervous system that does fight, right, or flight, run away, or freeze, a lot of people freeze as well, fight, flight, or freeze, goes through various stages. And you can imagine that it's designed more for a burst response, right? It was designed more for survival, and it was a burst mode. And once the threat was gone, your sympathetic nervous system should calm down and we should be in a better place. Well, in this day and age, all you would have to do is flip on a 24/7 cable news channel and have red banners flashing across constantly and watch your poor sympathetic drive go right up. And it'll stay there for not just hours and not just days, it'll stay there for weeks and months and oftentimes even years. That system isn't designed to run on high gear for years and decades. It eventually starts to fatigue. And the best analogy I've come up with that is think about some of these various biomarkers as fuel tanks, right? And if we can keep your fuel tanks topped off, we don't want them overflowing, we don't want them empty, but if we can keep them topped off, that's a nice way to be able to go into a stress response so that you feel like you can handle it, and then you settle back down and you still have some fuel left to calm down and move on in life. Early, middle, and late stage stress responses. If you catch a patient who's in an early stage stress response with their sympathetic fight or flight nervous system, right, or what we would call a neuroadrenal stress response, all those markers are going to be high. They're just going to be cranking high. They'll have a high cortisol rhythm. They'll have high neurotransmitters generally across the board, and they won't feel real good, but they'll have plenty of energy. They'll usually be real jittery, usually more anxious versus depressed. They'll have plenty of energy to push through everything they need to do. I'm still working. I'm still managing the kids. We're still got everything working at home. I'm just not calm and happy like I used to be. I'm feeling stressed. Okay, fair enough. Second stage, mid-stage stress responses, some of these fuel tanks start to run low. And when these fuel tanks start to run low, all of a sudden it gets a little bit harder to keep your physical energy high, to keep your cognitive energy high, to keep your mood balanced, to keep sleep in check where you're sleeping well and sleeping long enough, right? And all of that eventually has an effect on your metabolism and your immune system as well, which doesn't turn out well in the long run. So here we have a mixed bag. Now, the question should be, well, Scott, what fatigues first? And the answer to that is it depends on the individual patient, which again justifies testing. I can't stress that enough. It's so important to recognize that the test gives you the roadmap of where to go with these individuals. And if you don't know what's high, what's looking pretty good, and what's looking low, how are you going to know how to support them in terms of supplements? End stage stress responses, you're running on fumes. Those test results are low. Cortisol rhythms are flat, right, and depleted. You look at things like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine, they're all just low. And these people feel like garbage. Not only am I still stressed, but I got nothing left to fight anymore. I'm just ready to kind of roll over and say, enough. I can't keep going. These people feel miserable, and they get a lot more symptoms as they stay in that end stage stress response over time. So just my own little early, middle, late stage stress responses. Excuse me. Let's go through some case studies. Here's a 16-year-old male, ADHD diagnosis, poor academic motivation. Well, what do you mean? Plenty smart. Parents say it, teachers say it. Scott, I just don't really care about school. Yeah, but you're super smart. Yeah, I understand. I'm not really there anymore. Addictive behaviors like gaming are becoming more important to me. Oof. All right, that's not great. I'm tired in the afternoon. The next question should be, well, how much are you sleeping? Well, I stay up too late gaming. Okay, then let's change some of that lifestyle, and maybe we can use some of our neuroendocrine support, right, to help you want to fall asleep quicker versus escape your life by staying up gaming all the time. That would be important. Accomplished swimmer, really good. I've been to state 2 different times in his high school career, which was cool. Gluten-free and casein-free, low-carb, low-sugar diet already. He was also corn-free and soy-free. Excuse me. Parents were looking for alternatives to pharmaceutical management. They had tried some. And Scott, he just doesn't want any additional therapists. He's tried talk therapists and we've tried psychiatrists and psychologists, and we're just ready for some new ideas here. Sounds good. Let's give you a neuroadrenal panel to take home. What's in a neuroadrenal panel? Well, if you're looking at it from Labrix or doctor's data, right? Now you're talking about serotonin, GABA, dopamine, norepinephrine and epinephrine, glutamate, glycine, histamine, PEA, phenylethylamine, and a 4-point cortisol, along with DHEA. Go home, do your test. We'll get back together in a couple of weeks when those results are back, and we'll talk about supplement protocols. Sounds good. Here's cortisol rhythm. How's this looking to you guys? I'm going to guess you're saying not too cool for a teenager, right? In a perfect world, we're here. I'm going to assume that you can see my mouse. We are here in the green range and not in the yellow or red, meaning high, or blue, meaning low range. We want to be in the sweet spot green. So yellow is what's acceptable in terms of the 2 standard deviations reference ranges. Green is your sweet spot. Green is your optimal range, right? And you can see the reference range and the optimal range is listed here. We want that range to be dialed in nice and optimized, especially for an otherwise healthy 16-year-old, right? This should not be showing signs of types of sympathetic cortisol, adrenal types of fatigability here. So what do we want to do? Well, his DHEA is looking nice at 292, and usually you'll see that with teenagers at towards the high end of this reference range, towards 336. But this cortisol rhythm, well, you could bump this up. And what would you use to do that? You would use licorice root. Now, licorice root is an enzyme modulator, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as time goes on, but it will boost cortisol by lowering cortisone. Okay, well, that's a nice idea. But we also know that he's tired in the afternoon. He's staying up too late and not sleeping as long as he should because he's staying up playing games. What if we got him sleeping more? Would it help him replenish his cortisol rhythm so that it looked nice and high in the morning with more sleep? I'm going to recommend that it would. And that's always a nice place to start. If you have, for example here, a child, right, a 16-year-old or a young adult who isn't sleeping well, start with the sleep side of the equation and see if that cortisol rhythm bumps up. If they're complaining about extreme fatigue all day long, then maybe we jump in and use the licorice root right away to give them some extra energy real quick. But we still need to fix the sleep. The sleep is the problem. The second half of that night, we should have this whole fight or flight system. I mean, your fight or flight system should be calm all night long. And then the second half of the night with that really nice, okay, we've been resting for a while. Our immune system has done a lot of its job. We should be replenishing cortisol at this point so that we can, jump in and watch a healthier cortisol rhythm if we're sleeping 7, 8, 9 hours a night. And sometimes teenagers even need 10 or 11. So keep that in mind as well. Licorice root's an option. DHEA, rarely needed for a teenager and not needed in this case. We'll keep licorice root on the back burner. We got to look at this because it's always with stress, neuro and adrenal, right? We have to. And so we look at serotonin ranges, 64, not great, right? We don't like this at all. And I'm going to see if I can move my little chat area over here where I can see those ranges a little better. 175 for a top range on serotonin for a male of his age. That's low. I mean, that's low across the board, 69 to 175, not cool. Dopamine's hanging in there. Okay, it's still on the lowish side, but it's not low. Norepinephrine, 21, low. Epinephrine, 2.9, kissing low, right? 1.8 to 12.9, not cool. And then we get to histamine and PEA. I want you to remember, if you're newer to this, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine work as a set. They are your catecholamines. They are all excitatory, generally speaking, in terms of their clinical presentation. They give you energy, they give you motivation, they give you confidence, and they get you going cognitively, emotionally, and physically. So when you support one, you kind of support all three from a supplement perspective. So when you're seeing a dopamine level that's lowish and a norepinephrine level that's low and an epinephrine level that's lowish, that's a good opportunity to go and give him some real solid support. Dopamine will help with motivation and reward systems and may help with some of that addictive gaming potential, right? Norepinephrine is all about cognitive stress responses and emotional stress responses. And we want that dialed in. We want that up towards, that 45-ish, 50 range. That'll feel nicer, that kind of upper third. Epinephrine's all about physical energy. That's your adrenaline. And so we want to support serotonin, but we also want to support the catecholamines. These guys are on a teeter-totter, meaning if all you do is give him 5-HTP for serotonin, you are going to further suppress the catecholamines, and it's not going to help him feel great long-term. The opposite of that is true as well. What if you just gave him a bunch of tyrosine for dopamine and ramped up those catecholamines? It's going to further suppress serotonin a little bit. That happens because of enzyme competition in terms of making the amino acids into their neurotransmitters. It also happens a little bit from an excitatory and inhibitory balance. So serotonin being calming and inhibitory and the catecholamines being excitatory. If you just bump up, just step on the accelerator or just step on the brakes, there's a balancing act that happens. So when both systems are low here, we want to make sure that you support both sides of that equation. Now, glutamate and histamine are both excitatory, but they're also inflammatory. They're also used by your immune system. So they're both neuro and immune. We like those guys, at least I like those guys, a little bit down towards the low end of things. I like them down towards that 30th percentile or lower. I have no problem with the glutamate number that's 15. The histamine number technically is actually low, and that doesn't necessarily feel so good either. So you could use something like histidine as a precursor and give them a little more energy. Histamine as a neurotransmitter is not only a little bit inflammatory, right, if your immune system is using it, but it's also involved in your consciousness and your activation of your brainstem. So that's an option as well, to go after some histidine to make some more histamine. And PEA has a lot to do with focus and concentration. So for those of you that see brain fog patients and see cognitive complaint patients, we want to make sure that PEA levels are supported. If people are saying, my attention's not so good, I'm brain foggy in the afternoon now, phenylalanine is a precursor to PEA, and you can use that very quickly and very easily and safely to boost up PEA levels and see if it has an effect on attention and cognition. That can be nice. All right, what are we going to do with this poor guy? Vitamin D, probiotics, and fish oils, those are three of my core right out of the gates. I think everybody benefits from some of those, and especially right now with immune system scenarios going on, I like vitamin D levels up in my office above 60. I think some broad range probiotics are nice. I think some essential fatty acids are nice for the vast majority of us, both in terms of brain and cardiovascular health, as well as immune anti-inflammatory health. No more late night gaming unless it's on the weekends, right? If you do some on the weekends, all right, maybe. During the week, we got to stop this. Always do some lifestyle medicine. You can't just let people float and just take capsules and not change their lifestyle at all. That's not fair to them. So we're going to give you some homework to do with lifestyle. We're going to give you some supplements to do, and we're going to see how this changes your physiology. We're going to use tyrosine, 500 milligrams in the morning, 250 milligrams after school. Remember, it's a tough time motivating and focusing after school. Now, I'm not a fan of using excitatory products after 3 p.m. Personally, I don't want it to throw off your sleep pattern. So 250 milligrams, a lower dose after school of tyrosine. Tyrosine is the precursor to dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. We're going to get that catecholamine system going. But we just mentioned we can't do that alone, right? What if we use a combination of tyrosine, and you could also use rhodiola if you wanted to, 200 milligrams in the morning, 100 milligrams after school. These are 3 to 5% rozapins, just so that you can standardize it with whatever supplement company you're using. You could also use some just plant-based L-Dopa, or you could use a little bit of plant-based L-Dopa with tyrosine and rhodiola, and we did that as well. 50 milligrams in the morning of Mucuna pruriens. The other one is Mucuna cochinchonensis, and they're just L-Dopa, plant-based L-Dopa, and you can use those to support the catecholamines as well. That's all going to stimulate the excitatory side, right? The catecholamines, but it's going to inhibit the what? It's going to inhibit the serotonin level. So we have to give some 5-HTP. Now, I'm generally a fan of 5-HTP before bed. I think it works better to refill your fuel tanks for serotonin while you're sleeping. It helps support sleep cycles. And if you use it during the day, oftentimes people will say they get a little tired and a little fatigued. Now, if you have a super anxious patient with low serotonin levels, they may love some 5-HTP during the day to bring those serotonin levels up. But I tend to like 5-HTP dosed at night. So we're going to use usually between 100 and 200 milligrams. We started him at 150 milligrams at bedtime. I also enjoy taurine as a calming amino acid and theanine as a calming neurotransmitter and amino acid. These all help together and can be kind of synergistic that way. You could start with just one. We used all three here: taurine 300 milligrams at bedtime and theanine 200 milligrams at bedtime. And together, that little 1-2 punch of here's what you're going to do in the morning, here's what you're going to do after school, and here's what you're going to do at bedtime, while you do a good job not gaming during the week and even turning it in a little bit earlier in terms of your sleep pattern on the weekends. By week 3, you can see his quote here on the bottom. So this is what a focused brain feels like, right? I mean, wow, awesome. And he comes in and he's like, I don't know that I've ever experienced this. I feel like I can just bang out classwork very quick at school and study halls as well as after school when I need to, and I actually have time to relax and do whatever I choose to do, whether it's athletics or swimming or playing games or whatever else, versus escaping the homework and the studies by gaming and never coming back to it in a way that's fun and enjoyable. So he did really, really cool. Could you throw licorice root in there? You could. We never needed it. And he turned out great symptomatically. So neat patient. He was more of, you talk about physical, cognitive, and emotional stressors. He was more of a cognitive stressor. Doc, I've had attention difficulties all my life. I'm smart as a whip, but I just don't know how to focus it. I can't bring it together. And with the help of that little chemistry, and we did sensory motor work in here as well. We did some visual work with his eyes to make sure his gaze stability was good. We did interactive metronome so that we could tie together what he sees with what he hears, with how he moves. And, being an athlete, he was pretty good at a lot of that stuff already. So I think the chemistry was super important for him. And that was interesting to watch his stress response in terms of his presentation for attention challenges improved dramatically, more through the nervous system versus the cortisol system. But nonetheless, the cortisol system, we did expect it to bounce back once we got him sleeping a little better. So awesome to watch him. I see one little question here about when we retest, and I think I'll save that for the end because I've got a couple different answers on that. Just what you want to hear, right? Okay. 55-year-old complaining of slow weight gain over the last decade, decreased libido, moderate fatigue, moderate difficulty concentrating. Does that sound like every postmenopausal woman that's in your office? Probably, right? And those are things that we certainly want to peek into. Now, because of me having more of an integrative neuro background, I tend to attract more patients that have neurologic complaints but maybe have already done some of the endocrine side of things with other functional medicine practitioners. So maybe they're already on bioidentical hormones and still complaining about these things. In this case, she was not. Mild anxiousness for many, many years, chronic neck and upper back pain, but it was of a mild type. So yes, this wasn't a huge issue in terms of, oh my gosh, I hurt constantly and it's throwing off my mood and it's making me stress eat more. That's not what was happening here. It was, listen, I'm a musician. I play piano. I have some chronic neck and upper back pain. All right, that makes sense. Previously, very high lifestyle stress, greatly improved over the previous 3 years. How did it change? Family lifestyles all improved and family stress all went down, and her stress went down dramatically with the success of other family members. Awesome. But that brings back the point, you can't always change somebody's lifestyle, right? For her, a lot of her stress was family-based. Well, unless you're going to run away from your entire family, that's not going to do a whole lot. Plus, it's going to cause other stressors. So in this case, it just took time for the lifestyle piece to be able to fall into place, and it did. But geez, Scott, things have been a lot less stressful the last 3 years. I still don't feel that great. I'm still putting on weight slow. I still want to help with libido and fatigue and concentration. I want to get my brain and my body up and running more. Sounds good. Already minimizes gluten and dairy, eats a largely organic diet. I didn't put this in here. Really enjoy walking. Started doing yoga 2 to 3 times a week a couple of years ago and love it, along with some light resistance. We already mentioned that we play music and piano all the time and sing. No current medication. Supplements included probiotic fish oils and, again, vitamin D3 and K2. Those are good basics, right? Those are just basic. Low inflammatory diet. Let's support your gut a little bit. Let's support your immune system a little bit. Let's give you some good essential fatty acids. I think those are things that the vast majority of us can benefit from all the time. What are we going to do for this cortisol rhythm? well, this is looking kind of rough, right? I mean, we shouldn't say that. The DHEA is low, 98 with a reference range of 106 to 300. Okay, so we should probably get some DHEA going in there. And I will let you know that even though we didn't put her sex hormones in here, she was progesterone deficient. She wasn't super elevated in any way, shape, or form on any of her estrogens, but the ratio of progesterone compared to estrogen made her look estrogen dominant, right? And so we did a little topical progesterone. We did a little DHEA, right? Just start at 10 or 20 milligrams in the morning. That's fine. And again, you could use some licorice root here. Do we need it? Well, maybe. We've got moderate fatigue. I think it should be on the options list, right? And that's exactly how I discuss it with all patients. I said, listen, we're going to put this on the options list. Let's go. Let's see what else is going on with neurotransmitters. Somehow I jumped way far ahead. Here's what's going on with neurotransmitters. Serotonin level, not low, but maybe suboptimal. I tend to like them more towards 110, 120. That's my own personal preference. Dopamine levels, I'm going to like it up probably towards 225. I think you'll feel a little bit better energetically that way. And then we get this norepinephrine that's just, it's low, 22. It's kind of in the toilet, right? We want to get that guy up towards at least 35, 40, even potentially 45. That'll feel nicer. Epinephrine's hanging in there. So again, maybe a little serotonin support, maybe a little catecholamine support, possibly some licorice, definitely some DHEA, and I already told you that we did a little topical progesterone as well. We go down the rest of this list. Glutamate levels, I tend to like those guys down a little bit lower, right? In this case, kind of under 25 is where I would say for glutamate and histamine, so I like those guys on the lower side. That looks pretty darn good. GABA levels float all over the place, and you guys can use GABA as a supplement for anyone that's experiencing difficulty falling asleep or daytime anxiousness. It's easy to try things like GABA and see if it makes a difference. I don't base my GABA usage off of solely atostrozole. I'm going to use it based a little bit more on symptomatology that way. A lot of times people's GABA ranges fall within the range that's on the atostrozole. And there's nothing wrong with adding some GABA for people that, like we said, experience anxiousness or difficulty falling asleep. That's a good option. But she's more of a fatigue patient, right? And a more of a, how do I start to burn more calories and really get my metabolism going patient. So we want to go after a little bit of serotonin with some 5-HTP, 50 milligrams, a little bit of tyrosine to go after that dopamine, norepi, and epi, especially that norepinephrine. I'm hoping that's really where it sticks. If we had more difficulty concentrating still after we did this work, we could go after this PEA level because that's on the low side, right, with some phenylalanine, and that might be a good option. So that's in the consideration area. And why would we use a methylated B complex? Methylated Bs, from a neurotransmitter perspective, are cofactors. That methylation is necessary to produce your monoamine neurotransmitters. Your monoamines are going to be serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So those four. And if we have someone who's generally low in those four, some extra methylated Bs feel pretty good. I will give you a little clinical gem and let you know that methylated B complex vitamins don't tend to feel good for people who have high catecholamines. So if you're in an early stage stress response with high outputs of dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, and you start to take a bunch of methylated B vitamins, or not even necessarily a bunch, right? It might just be, 400 milligrams of just the little guys. Just those good methylated multi-Bs, it might push that catecholamine system up even higher and feel more stressed and more anxious and more wound up, kind of like you're on a bad caffeine buzz. So I like methylated Bs. I tend to use them sparingly. I know they've been the rage for a long time with methylation genetics, but I find that they work best when people are low on serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. That's when you're going to get the best help there. And so that's exactly what we did there with her neurotransmitter profile to help her, and that turned out pretty slick. And she did great. She really enjoyed how she felt across the board. All symptomatologies, all generally improving, and no big complaints since then. A lot of times it takes a couple months for everything to wind up and replenish. If you have someone who's complaining about things for years, like this case, it's been a slow onset over years, I still am going to tell people these first 3 months are when we're really viewing how you're going to respond. So I look at things in 3-month chunks personally. I want some improvement on month 1. I want more consistent improvement on month 2. And by the time we're moving into month 3, I want you to start to forget about how you felt when we first started. Now, if you have somebody who's felt miserable for 30 years, you're going to have to change that storyline and slow it down a little bit. But for most people, if it's been months to years of symptoms, it works that fast. So that was more of an emotional stress response, right? Here's a physical stress response. Well, what happened? 2.5 years ago, I got rear-ended. Person was going 55 miles an hour. I fractured my nose. I had a moderate concussion. I've been in pain ever since with daily headaches, fatigue. My neck hurts. I'm experiencing moodiness and lose my temper a lot more than I ever used to. And occasionally I'm dizzy, Scott. Okay. She presented more for the neuro rehab side of my practice because she knew that I worked with concussions and all the sensory motor systems. But I said, hey, I really think we can come in from a neuroadrenal perspective and fuel you back up so that we can get rid of some of these symptoms while we're doing all of our neuro rehab and our hands-on care. I sleep anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a night because pain wakes me up all the time. Well, that's not good. We need you getting sleeping first so that we can hopefully get rid of some of these pain responses. And it'll help with headaches, and it should help with fatigue, and it should help with dizziness, right? And moodiness. Vegetarian, have been for many, many years. Walking and light resistance 3 times a week as long as my pain allows. Feldenkrais practitioner, she was really good at movement and stretching and strengthening, right? And had been for a long time. So we can't just say, you can exercise your way out of it, or hey, you can move out of it. It's not going to work. She had significant body work from all different types of practitioners, and it just wasn't getting where she needed to. So she wanted to add in brain-based exercises, and we had tried that for a little while, a couple months before we actually did this test. And I said, it's time. We got to go after the metabolic side of how to fuel you back and get you running. Previously, we were on progesterone cream. Didn't really notice any big changes in it. Didn't really enjoy it, so we went off of it. Currently, levothyroxine, and those were with both different practitioners. So probiotics, magnesium for pain, right? And muscles and brain, always nice. And D3 and K2 also beneficial. Here's what our neurotransmitters look like. Serotonin, just barely inside that range, 60 to 125. She's at 62, not cool. What about those catecholamines? Dopamine, low. Norepinephrine, on the high side, right? High-ish. And we'd say, well, that norepinephrine's actually pretty good, but that dopamine's so low, and that epinephrine's kind of low too at 4.5. We need to go after these catecholamines, but we need to do it a little bit differently in this case, because there's a cofactor that'll help norepinephrine convert it to epinephrine, and I want to make sure you know that one. Glutamate levels, remember I had said I like them under 25, that's just me, but on the lower third is where I prefer glutamate, so that's nice. Histamine, same thing. It's actually a little low. We could use this histidine as a little bit of an energy producer if we needed to, if we didn't get the benefits we wanted from dopamine and epinephrine. And PEA, we could use that too. And a lot of times by the time people are doing these tests with neurologic complaints, right? And we said the sky's the limit of these neurologic complaints when it comes to neurotransmitter testing, you're going to see a lot of low PEA levels. It's just one of those things that it's hard to keep your PEA levels up and running when you're developing a laundry list of symptomatology neurologically. So we have all kinds of opportunities there, I think. I get excited about that. And that's exactly what I say to patients. Guys, we got lots of opportunities. Let's go and figure out what we can do. Well, let's keep your probiotics, your magnesium, your D3. Historically, very sensitive to supplements, Scott. We will start super slow. Okay, sounds like a good plan. 5-HTP, 50 milligrams at bedtime. We can slowly increase it up towards 200 if we want to. Let's start with 50 and then work up to 100 and see how we do. Tyrosine, again, rhodiola and tyrosine, or either one during the day, one of those two, or you could use some plant-based L-DOPA as well, like we talked about, to go after those catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Start slow. It's okay to start with, 300 milligrams of tyrosine. You don't have to jump right into 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 milligrams a day. You can start slow with people that are sensitive. That's easy. Rhodiola, we mentioned those dosages already. 50 milligrams, you can go up to 250 milligrams daily, and I know people go even higher than that. Depends on the concentration of the rhodiola as well with the rosavins. Those are the active ingredient in there that'll boost dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Now, SAMe is what I want you to take away from this one. As we boost those catecholamines, remember, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epi are all going to kind of come up a little bit as a set, and hopefully they find balance amongst all three of them. But in this case, we've got a dopamine that's lowish, a norepinephrine that's highish, and then an epinephrine that's also lowish. SAMe is a cofactor to help norepinephrine convert into epinephrine. And when that is cofactor, SAMe shines in terms of helping mostly mood challenges, but also give you some physical energy. Remember, with stress responses, especially psychologically, norepinephrine, if it's real high or if it's low, you tend to feel stressed emotionally and kind of anxious. You're going to be more on the anxious side, whether it's high or whether it's low. But if it's high, SAMe can help bring it down a little bit and convert it into epinephrine, which will give a little bit more physical energy while you're calming down the psychological, emotional side, which feels really good. I know in the literature it's used more for depression than it is for anxiousness. I've found that it works better for anxiousness than depression, personally. And we could use some phenylalanine as well. Usually we start with those at 500 milligrams. You can go up to 1,000 milligrams. You can even do it twice a day. You can do it morning and at lunch to try to boost cognitive function and see how that feels. And again, fish oils. And could you do a B complex, a methylated B there? Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that because all of those monoamines are low, right? Stress can be initiated for multiple reasons: physical, cognitive, emotional. Neurotransmitters along with adrenals, boy, that's a nice way to do it, right? And absolutely, if you like thyroid levels in there, awesome. If you like sex hormone levels in there, awesome. And, you know, with chronic stress, at least in my office, anyone who's over 40 and you've never had your sex hormones tested, yeah, we're going to look at that. Thyroid hormones too? Yeah, we're going to look at that. But in this case, we're focused more on the neuroadrenal system and the sympathetic nervous system for the primary drivers of stress responses. And that helps. It helps a lot to fill up those fuel tanks. A variety of stress symptoms ranging from mood to cognitive issues to addictions, cravings, pain, fatigue, insomnia, even neurogenic GI systems, right, can be attributed to neurotransmitter and hormone imbalances. You guys will find a ton of GI pain complaints and people that talk about gas and indigestion and irritable bowel scenarios and constipation too, with low serotonin outputs. And as you bump up serotonin and balance out those catecholamines, their GI tract just starts to work again because they can move into the rest and digest mode much, much better with healthy serotonin numbers. And if you test neurotransmitter and hormone levels, it enables you as a practitioner, and even better, shows the patient how to utilize targeted therapies and have a roadmap to not only help them faster, better, more specifically, but you can also monitor their progress with retesting. So that can be beneficial as well. Listen, if you liked how I teach some of this stuff and you find that this approach works for you, I'm going to encourage you to jump over to clinicalthinkingcap.com. This is my new little brainchild last year, and sign up for the free Neurotransmitter 101 class. 3 separate videos, each about 15 minutes long. One's on glutamate, one's on serotonin, one's on catecholamines. They will cost you absolutely nothing. You get a new video in your inbox every day for 3 days, and we can talk all about these clinical gems with these 3 neurotransmitters. If you feel like you want to jump right in and say, I want to even get even deeper into it, you have a couple different options. You can certainly go into Neurotransmitters 101 on clinicalthinkingcap.com. That is a 3-hour course that I teach. It's all video-based. It's very easy to watch with good slides, and we go through case study, and we talk all about lab testing and how it works and why you would do it, and really get into the nuts and bolts of it. I think the class turned out awesome. And take advantage of all of the free webinars that have already been recorded from Doctors Data and Labrix that are on their website. Once you're an account holder there, my gosh, you can watch so much information all the time. And they have their Wellness Wednesday presenters talking about hormones and neurotransmitters and adrenals. And so there's just so much wonderful information to watch all over the place. Those are both options for you. Stress 101, I just released 2 days ago on Monday. And so that is a 2-hour and 15-minute course. Again, all videos, all with nice slides. And we're going to talk about the neurophysiology, again, of neurotransmitters and adrenals in a much deeper way than what we did here. And we'll go through some different case studies than what I did here. And we'll really dive into, okay, how do we discuss this with patients? How do we choose what tests we want to do? And how do we figure out, everything from time of day to supplement protocols, et cetera, et cetera. And Insomnia 101 is coming soon. I've been working on this one. Just started to this past week as I was wrapping up Stress 101. And that'll be coming soon. So if you're already logged in and signed up for the free Neurotransmitter 101 course on clinicalthinkingcap.com, you will be on my email list so that you get an email once Insomnia 101 has launched. And if you just want to do sleep and nothing else, and that'll be coming down the road as well. So a couple of different ideas there for you if you like how we teach this and want to become part of my little circle. And in the meantime, let's go to questions. I want to make sure I thank you guys for your time. I know how, I mean, the amount of emails I have in my inbox of different webinars and different groups wanting my attention. So it's a lot, right? And especially since everything has slowed down just a hair in the last 6 months. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment to integrative and functional medicine and a more broad approach to how do we fuel our patients up and really get them back and running. Hopefully you found this stress talk beneficial. There were a couple questions on this chat that I'll address here.
I can also feed them to you, Scott.
Go for it.
Okay.
But I'm not scrolling.
All right, let me help. So we have a question about if you prefer oral or sublingual amino acid supplements to treat neurotransmitter deficiencies.
I've always used oral capsules. Now, that having been said, when I do neurotransmitter work or amino acid supplements in pediatric patients and they're not swallowing capsules, I will open them up and we will mix them in things, right? I have had parents mix these in liquid chocolate, preferably organic. I have had them mix them in, if they're not on a dairy-free diet, yogurt, or if they are on a dairy-free diet, maybe it's something like coconut yogurt or applesauce or things like that. And I'll tell you some of my favorite ways to mix them if you're not a capsule swallower and you want to either make the powder into a liquid. You can mix them in bitter juices. Really sweet juices work too, but the bitter ones almost hide the amino acid aspect of the bitterness of it even better. And then you can suck it down through a straw and it'll really shoot right over your tongue and right down your gullet so that you barely even taste it. So that's a good little trick for pediatric patients if you're going to use some of these and you don't want to use either. There are some liquids that are available, certainly. And then if you don't want to use, there's also some chewables available. That some people use, but I tend to use capsules most of all. You can get a decent sized dose in a capsule so that you're just taking, 1 or 2 capsules and boom, down it goes, and it seems to work very well.
Excellent. Okay, next question. Can you explain in a bit more detail why the methylated Bs can push up the catecholamines? This provider, sorry. No, go ahead. That's good.
You sure?
Yep.
So, methylation genetics is your predisposition to being a suboptimal methylator. Great. Now, let's actually get a snapshot of what some of this methylation would look like, right? And so you might look at something like homocysteine as an inflammatory type of marker and say, okay, maybe some extra methylated Bs will help that homocysteine come down. Or in this case, methylated Bs, especially, whether you're using B9 or B12 or even SAMe, they are cofactors for producing serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Now, I don't know about you, but in my practice, when I first started, the first 5 years, started about 4 years, that I wasn't using neurotransmitter testing, and I was using more of like the organic acid test with some of the metabolites and some of the amino acid precursors, it would say, give a bunch of extra methylated Bs because maybe their catecholamine metabolites were low. And these people would start to get real stimmy. If they were kiddos or if adults, they would start to get more agitated and more anxious and become more of an insomniac. And I'd sit there and go, why does this happen? Well, methylated Bs are a cofactor for, like we said, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, amongst other things, right? And if you already have somebody who's in an early stage stress response where they are cranking out high levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, and you add a methylated B vitamin on top of that and push that dopamine, norepi, and epi even higher in terms of its production, you're going to feel more agitated, more irritable, a little bit more like you're on a bad caffeine buzz, and you're probably not going to sleep as well. And so I said, oh, that's what's happening. If I could just figure out, okay, now that I've got a urine neurotransmitter test, there's a certain group of individuals who are in an early stage fight or flight stress response that when we add those methylated Bs in there, they feel worse. They don't feel better. And it's because we're supporting a higher production of those excitatory neurotransmitters, pushing that fight or flight system further, harder, and it doesn't feel good at all. So in those cases, the methylated Bs coming out usually felt better. And that was all trial and error back, when I started in 2000, those first couple of years, I'd say, well, let's try it, methylated B complex. And I'd put everybody on them because that's what we were taught to do at the time. And I bet 30% of the patients didn't feel real good on it. And I said, why is that after even just 2 weeks? You feel overstimulated. Why? I mean, stop it, but why? So anyway, that's the mechanism behind it. And you'll see it as a cofactor. You'll see those methylated Bs in a cofactor when you look at those neurotransmitter flowcharts in terms of how they're produced from the amino acids, especially dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Those methylated Bs are right in there as a cofactor, and methylation is important. But if you're in an early stage, it may not feel good.
Thank you for that. The next question says BPD and neurotransmitter deficiency. Any recommendation?
BPD. What are they going for with BPD? Anyone?
Okay, if that doc could please clarify, because I'm not sure what BPD is.
I don't know off the top of my noggin, but I'd love to know now.
Dr. Chambita,
teach, you learn something new.
Okay, well, go ahead. Hopefully we'll get some clarification. Oh, sorry, bipolar disorder. There we go.
Bipolar disorder makes all the sense in the world. So here's my take on it. Chances are they're medicated, okay? And chances are they're on a mood stabilizer. And we actually, in that Stress 101 class I just talked about, we do go into somebody who's on one of these and use it as a case study. Those mood stabilizers are generally designed to be either agonists or antagonists of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine receptors to try to level out how much they're getting stimulated, right? They either turn them on or they slow them down. Now, if you have at least a neurotransmitter test that is going to show, again, a roadmap of serotonin with those catecholamines, and again, it may be that glutamate is sky high, and that's going to be the place to bring down brain function a bunch and calm it down so that you're not as bipolar that way. You at least have multiple different options. I am a huge fan of using neurotransmitter testing along with hormone testing for bipolar patients. And then if we're on medications, we're going to start real slow and easy, one supplement at a time, low dose, going after whatever makes the most sense based on the test results.
Excellent. Thank you.
They're really taken on a case-by-case basis, right? And if it's a severe rapid cycling bipolar disorder, that's going to be a little bit harder, but doesn't mean that you wouldn't want to necessarily try it, especially if they're looking for additional help beyond what medications are doing for them so far.
Okay. The next question is about GABA. I understand oral GABA doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, so do you find it helpful? And if so, what is the dose you typically use? This provider hasn't found it being super helpful for anxiety.
Yeah, so I find it kind of hit and miss too. And, for a while there was phenylated GABA that's not available anymore. That seemed to do a better job crossing the blood-brain barrier. Now, regular GABA, in my office, we just use Pharma GABA brand of it. And some people it hits out of the park, and other people it does absolutely nothing. So if it does nothing, we don't go past a bottle of it. And if it doesn't help in terms of calmness, then we're going to let it go and move on to something like theanine and taurine and 5-HTP. Dosing wise, at least with the Pharma GABA supplement, it starts at 250 milligrams per capsule. And I'll usually start with 1 or 2 of those at a time. And a lot of times I'll use them in the calmness for evening before sleep. But there's nothing wrong with trying them during the day as well. GABA tends to be non-drowsy, which is nice. And it can, for some people, have a really nice, gentle calming effect on it. But you're right, it's generally not crossing the blood-brain barrier. But you have to remember, GABA has peripheral effects as well. And that's true of all these amino acids and neurotransmitters. We all think of them only as brain, but they're not. They're peripheral as well. And a lot of times, if you can help calm down the peripheral side, especially when you're talking about the neuroadrenal piece from a stress response with using things like 5-HTP and GABA, there can be benefits on the brain as well. It's a two-way street, right? Central and peripheral.
Yeah. So let's get back to that retesting question. You said you might have some insight about when you like to retest.
So on the early side, I will retest as soon as 1 to 2 months if somebody's feeling absolutely miserable and they haven't responded to the protocol that we put in place. So that's the first answer to it. That's the worst case. Wow, why would you test somebody so fast? If it's been 2 months and they're just absolutely horrible, whether it's anxiousness or, in my office, maybe it was a seizure disorder or something else that was real severe, chronic pain or chronic insomnia. Scott, I'm not sleeping more than an hour a night. We've been doing this now for 2 months. Okay, let's do a retest. Most people are going to start to feel better over those first 3 months. in a perfect world where money's no object, it'd be great to have a test every 3 months, but that's not often an opportunity for a lot of individuals, right? So if you're feeling pretty good at 3 months and you continue to feel good up to 6 months, somewhere in that 6 to 12 month range, I'm going to probably want to retest on you, especially if you feel like there's more that can be done both as a practitioner and if the patient's asking you, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? Now, if you did just neurotransmitters, you're probably going to want to see those a little more often. If you did neurotransmitters and adrenals, you can work off of that probably pretty easily for 6 months in my experience. And if you did neurotransmitters, adrenals, and sex hormones, especially if people are over 40, right? Now you've got so many different opportunities to work off of. Going 12 months is pretty easy on that. So a lot of times if you're feeling pretty good, I may wait till 12 months to see a retest. I happen to think from an optimal aging, optimal health perspective, that annual retesting of neurotransmitters, adrenal stress hormones like cortisol, sex hormones, and thyroid is a great way to optimize your metabolism as the decades go by. And so that's what I recommend to all of my patients as they're feeling better.
Thanks. We're getting short on time, so maybe two more. Here's a great one. Is there a supplement which can be used safely in low energy and anxiety states if the patient is not willing to do a test?
Well, I think tyrosine is a pretty easy one for that. So if they're both physically and kind of cognitively tired, I think low dose tyrosine, right? 500 milligrams or less, and just start with a single dose of it in the morning before breakfast and see how that goes. Now, as you look at those flow charts, you'll also see that phenylalanine is in there. And phenylalanine does two things. It converts down to PEA to help with cognitive, attentive types of symptomatology, and it converts over towards tyrosine and trickles down into dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So phenylalanine might be another safe option for you as well if it's a little bit more cognitive and physical fatigue. And you could start, 500 milligrams there. Just start just 500 milligrams before breakfast and see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Both of those you can go up towards 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams divided between two different doses and take them before breakfast and before lunch. But start real slow and easy so that you don't overstimulate the system. Remember, you will overstimulate the system if their serotonin levels low and all their dopamine, norepi, and epi are low, and all you're doing is pushing for energy, and it kind of suppresses that serotonin level. I might have more energy, but I might not sleep as much, and I might not feel as calm and attentive. I might feel a little more agitated. So it's a balance. It's always a balance.
I agree. And this last question, I think I can take it. They're just asking the medium for neuroadrenal testing. Is it urine or saliva? And neurotransmitters are typically tested in urine and cortisol in saliva.
Bingo, bango.
Bingo, bango. Guys, Dr. Theirl, thank you so much. I have to say that I learn something every time I have an opportunity to watch you speak. So thanks for offering us your expertise today. And to all of you who joined us, thanks so much for giving us your time and attention. Just as a reminder, everyone's going to receive a link to this recording in the next few days. So check your email or doctorsdata.com for that, and also for future webinar dates coming up, like our LENS Symposium. Thanks, Dr. Theirl. Have a nice day.
Thank you guys so much. Keep up the good work, everybody. Appreciate it.